This is Docs, Jocks, and Science Talks with Dr. Allan Tissenbaum and Dr. Alan Heldman, an orthopedic surgeon and an interventional cardiologist, discussing masters athletics, training, injuries, health, and fitness.
So you like skeletal muscle, but you say it funny because you're originally from Canada.
I do. We can say it either way, skeletal or skeletal.
I like cardiac muscle because it never stops.
And I like skeletal muscle because it generates power and gets it from point A to point B.
As long as the heart muscle keeps going.
I do think they're mutually inclusive. One cannot do one without the other.
The skeletal muscle is an important determinant of insulin sensitivity. It's a part of an important part of metabolic regulation, really, and the whole syndrome of insulin resistance, which leads to adult onset diabetes, and many of the complications are cardiovascular, really starts with an inadequacy of skeletal muscle. And many patients, we see that if we get them to put on some muscle, their diabetes gets better, their metabolic profile gets better, and of course, in the long run, that's better for their hearts.
There's certainly a correlation with skeletal muscle mass and longevity, but not bulky skeletal muscle mass, useful skeletal muscle mass. Longevity because of the insulin resistance and lack of resistance, as you stated, and also it diminishes the risk of falls and diminishes the injury rates that we all accumulate as we age. And these injuries, a hip fracture, broken back, broken wrists, lead to increased morbidity, which is hospitalization, and mortality, which is death.
Well, you and I both like to sprint, and sprinting is fun. But I got to think that if you really did a proper analysis and were able to take out all the other factors and simply compare the life expectancy of sprinters versus the life expectancy of trained endurance athletes, probably endurance training has additional benefits in terms of prevention of cardiovascular disease as we age, don't you think?
We would think, but it depends at what level people are doing endurance training and to what level they're doing sprinting. I mean, there are some cardiac problems with too much endurance training, as you're aware of. There's cardiac muscle damage, which I don't think sprinting leads to.
Yeah, no, that's certainly one of the interesting topics that we could talk about, and that's the increase in atrial fibrillation in particular, if in highly trained ultra endurance athletes.
So I would compare first the physique of my favorite muscle versus the physique of your favorite muscle. For me, being a sprinter, the physique that I see for a skeletal muscle or skeletal muscle, whatever we want to call it today, he's a good example, but a bad example is Ben Johnson. He was a muscular sprinter who was a world record holder for a while. Yes, he was tainted by steroids, but he had the physique, the muscle, the skeletal muscle mass that I like to see that is indicative to me of a sprinter.
Yeah, I'm struck that all the really elite sprinters look like Marvel superheroes. That they're big, they're strong, not just in the legs, in the shoulders, in the arms, but incredibly in the torso. They're all ripped with a 12-pack.
Yeah, it's about fourth generation, and fourth generation doesn't just come through the legs, it comes from the whole body. A strong core, strong upper body, and super strong legs. However, it doesn't do very much for the heart.
So, when people talk about a strong heart, in many cases, it's the heart itself and the heart muscle itself is not the primary determinant of aerobic fitness. If you go from being sedentary to starting to get into shape and doing some exercise training, it's honestly, it's not that the heart muscle itself is changing much. It's all the other parts of the cardiovascular system, the blood, the red blood cells, the fluid volume in the blood vessels, the capillaries, the ability of the muscles to extract oxygen from the blood. Those are all the things that change as you get into shape.
We see similar things with skeletal muscle. The adaptations are in terms of fibers where you can visually see them where someone gets bulkier, but there's also changes on the mitochondrial level, on the actual fiber type, on the length of the fibers, how fast they conduct, how fast the nerve impulses go up and down the muscles.
So Yeah. So
Bad.
as I've understood it, if I go from untrained to beginning to do some strength training, what happens in that first month is I can get dramatically stronger. And that's really not so much because of muscle adaptations itself, but much more about neuromuscular coordination.
Yes, I'd have to agree with you. The actual hypertrophy, if that's what we're looking for, is a later stage, but your strength will outmask your hypertrophy eventually. Eventually, they'll sort of catch up, and you'll start the hypertrophy, and your strength gains will diminish, but you'll continue to have hypertrophy.
Yeah. Well, I want some of that.
I think we all do, but at what expense? What are we willing to do? We know there's easier ways to do it, that's for sure. I was going to say, we need to sort of talk about different types of muscle, because in the muscle that I like, the muscle that gets you moving around, gets you lifting, gets you stronger, skeletal muscle, or skeletal muscle, as we keep going back and forth. There's different fiber types. There's different types of muscles within a large muscle. So within your quadriceps muscle, there's at least three fiber types that have been really identified that serve different functions for different activities. Is there something similar in the heart?
No. So the heart's differences are more anatomically divided. So there are specialized heart muscle cells which carry electrical impulses through the heart muscle. So all of the heart muscle is electrically excitable. All of those muscles can be stimulated with an electrical impulse and made to twitch. But there are certain pathways of muscle in the heart which carry those electrical impulses much more quickly. And those are the things which regulate the coordinated contraction of the heart muscle.
Yes, right. But for me as a sprinter, or for you who likes Roger Bannister, our muscle fibers are important. If you want to sprint, you want muscle fibers that generate more power and have less endurance. And if you want to be a miler or a distance runner, you want muscle fibers that generate less power but have more endurance. And our body has the ability, with training, to move amongst these fiber types.
So what do you think it takes from the skeletal muscle to run a 10-second 100? Does that require an innate genetic gift? And what else does it require?
It definitely requires an innate genetic gift. You were gened, or you were granted, or you were given by your relatives, you inherit a certain pattern of muscle fibers. Some people have more fast fibers and it'll make them run faster. Some people have more slow fibers. If you're one of these people that has a propensity of slow twitch fibers, you will never be fast. You can become faster, you will never be fast. Vice versa, if you were someone that is super, super fast, you're going to have a harder time, or an impossible time, to become an endurance runner. There's only a certain amount of fiber type switching that can be attained through training.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Now, I think the heart does adapt in some way to specific exercise, and there are studies which show that the size and even the shape of the heart does remodel over time differently if you're a boxer versus if you were a rower, to take two sort of extremes of being a pure strength and speed versus being an efficient machine for metabolizing oxygen and turning it into movement. So the heart's contribution to a 10-second 100-meter sprint is modest. Certainly, the heart rate must increase, and as we both know, it can double or triple in the space of a short sprint. But that's not really the limiting factor in your performance in a short sprint. You get out to 400 meters, and now aerobic fitness starts to contribute to your performance in a race, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, it all comes down to energy systems. In short sprints, 100 meters or less, the energy systems are what is within your muscle at the time you go into the starting blocks. When you get into longer sprints, plus 200, 400 meters, you need to start regenerating or get other energy sources, because you exhaust the energy sources that are in your muscles at the beginning of the race. That's where the heart really kicks in.
So I'd never run a 400 until December, the Florida Senior Games. I went out and tried one. Um, and had in mind, of course, that incredible goal that a few of our buddies have reached, which is to run under your age. And I'm 61, and I ran 65 seconds my first go out. The first 300, I was just running fast, and then at about 300, all of a sudden, man, I died. People were yelling at me to pick my knees up, and I'm like, I can't. I can't pick them up. What's wrong here? I sort of stumbled across the line. So,
There's a term for that. It's called the bear jumping on your back, because there's just so much extra weight. You just can't do anything.
so there's actually a video that you can see out there of Roger Bannister when he ran the first sub 4-minute mile. I went back and looked at the newspaper archives, and even in the late 19th century, the sports journalists were talking about the 4-minute mile as this question of is it even possible for humans to run a 4-minute mile? And many people, many physiologists and doctors and coaches and athletes were of the firm opinion that that it would kill you to run a 4-minute mile. That something terrible. That was the threshold. Maybe 4:02 was the threshold. And Roger Bannister was a medical student, right? And what I've read is that his big innovations in his training method that he came up with kind of on his own were, first of all, interval training. He ran repeat intervals at race pace and intentional recovery. And his first observation was, I'm running these repeats and my laps, my quarter miles are one, and I can't get it below that. And then he took a few days off, did no training, came back and was running repeat 59s. It's like that was a revelation that recovery actually was an important part of the training regimen. Anyway, Roger Bannister, a medical student, ran that sub 4-minute mile. The videos of him crossing the finish line, man, he looks like the bear is on his back.
Yeah, he is spent. No doubt about that. No doubt. Yeah, he's a one of a kind, and he thought his way through the 4-minute mile and had obviously had the physiology to accomplish it.
So what are the things that go wrong with skeletal muscle?
It ages like everything else does. It loses its flexibility. It loses its ability to regenerate to the point that it did before. It also has somewhat limited ability to completely regenerate from injury.
Yeah, a lot of the same things I would say are true for heart muscle. As we age, it does tend to become stiffer. It's not actually the contraction so much as the relaxation that's often the problem with an aging heart. In many cases, though, I think for skeletal muscle and for heart muscle, it's not exactly the muscle itself that's the problem. It's for the heart muscle, it's the arteries that are the problem, and the heart's not getting enough oxygen. Maybe your muscle, it's really the joints that are the problem. The muscle could be trained, but the joints are limiting, and so on.
But we also, your heart doesn't really change shape. You keep the muscle you have. The skeletal muscle, if not exercised or used, atrophies. It gets stronger, smaller, and less strong and generates less force.
Well, and as I said, the thing about the heart muscle is it keeps going even while you're sleeping. The heart does not ever take a rest.
Correct. Thank God for that.
So fortunately, we can replace the heart valves. We can often repair the diseased arteries. You can fix the joint problem or the ligament problem that's impairing the ability of the muscle to do its work. Anybody who's ever gone to a high school gym class has probably run a 100. They've probably run a mile. We all have a feeling for what those events are.
Correct. I think everyone, it's one of the few things that is universally done. Everyone knows who they're fast. They know who the fastest guy in their class was, and they also probably know who the slowest guy in their class was.
So if we took a world-class elite sprinter and said, now we're going to make you into a marathoner, or we took a world-class elite marathoner and said, now we're going to turn you into a sprinter, You're saying it really wouldn't work.
They'll be capable. I've seen lots of sprinters go and run marathons, and they run reasonable marathons, but not at a world-class level. And we all have different expectations. If you're a 10-second 100-meter guy and you're running a 3-hour marathon, for most people that might be great. But if you've been on the world stage as a top 100-meter runner, 3-hour marathon is no big deal to them.
Right. What else do we need to get in here? Obviously, we're going to have to do some editing here.
Correct. I think it's fine, actually. I think we just have to change the order of some stuff. Where do you want to put?
I made fun of orthopedic surgeons. You got to make fun of medical doctors.
All right. We could. I can do that. The flea, do you want to go really that low brow?
Sure. Let me have it.
All right. So when we be in a trauma situation in the hospital or have a bad injury, we'd go see the patient, and we made our decisions from the back table, and we'd see all these doctors around the patients and talking and making noises, and we called them the fleas because they were always buzzing around the patients and really doing nothing.
I think we were always called fleas because we like to take a little blood, right?
Let's
take a little blood. Let's do a little blood test before we make a decision.
Let's do a little bit more. Yeah, let's take another bite out of it. Yeah, but so it was always the fleas versus the bulls. And in reality, we have to work together. We do work together well. It's always just kind of gallows humor.
All right. Well, it's been fun talking to you. I hope I will see you again soon.
That'd be great. Yeah, that'd be wonderful. So we can make an Instagram, Jocks and Science.